Hello, welcome back to another First and Favourites video, and this time I've got a Mafia Romance edition. So I've started a First and Favourites kind of series. So far I've covered off First and Favourite authors, First and Favourite subgenres of romance, parts 1 and 2 will be just up before this one. Then coming up I'm going to have a tropes edition as well, so some of my first and favourite tropes. Today's Mafia Romance Monday video has a bit of a mixture of different types of first and favourites, not only for types of Mafia romances but also tropes within Mafia romances as well. So of course I'm going to kick off by talking about my first and favourite Mafia romances. Now I covered this off in my subgenre video already because I covered off Mafia romances in that one, and so my answer is exactly the same. So if you did see that one and you don't want to listen to me talk about these two books again, then please skip on to the next book. But if you haven't heard it or would like to hear me ramble on again, then the very first Mafia romance book that I ever read was Dark Russian Angel by Odette Stone, and I absolutely loved it. So Odette Stone has done a series of ice hockey romances. I really liked her writing, and then I saw that she had a Russian Mafia romance as well, and I picked it up to give it a try, and I absolutely loved it. And this really set me on a path of absolutely loving Mafia romances, and particularly Russian Mafia heroes. So Dark Russian Angel is book 1 in the Vancouver Mafia series. It's a close proximity story. The heroine witnesses a crime, the hero saves her, and basically she has to go and stay with him so that he can keep her safe from the bad guys. And our hero in this one is Andrusha. He is head of the Russian Mafia organization in Vancouver, and our heroine is Olivia. Now Olivia is a dancer. She was actually a professional ballet dancer, but she's been injured and is now dancing in a club. And one night she is finished work, she goes into the car park, she witnesses a murder, and then she becomes the #1 witness in this key murder trial. Now the person who did the shooting is another Mafia person from a rival organisation to Andrusha's, and of course he is doing everything he can to find the witness and make sure that she cannot speak at his trial. So she's kind of gone into witness protection with the police, but of course some of the police are corrupt, and she has had threats on her life on several occasions, and Andrusha finds out kind of what's going on, and he decides that he's going to kidnap her from the police, take her out of witness protection and keep her safe himself, because one, he doesn't think she's safe with the police, and he has a vested interest in making sure she gets to trial, because if she can put his rival away, then of course that eliminates one of his rivals in the city as well. And so that is basically what happens. And then Olivia goes to stay with him in his apartment, basically while he keeps her safe, and their relationship goes from there. So like I say, really nice Mafia romance. This is actually on the softer side of Mafia romances, but was a really good entry point into the world of Mafia, and I haven't looked back since. So then, what is my absolute favourite Mafia romance? Now, I gave 2 answers to this one in the previous one, but because I'm going to talk about the other book a little bit later on, I am basically going to say that my favourite Mafia romance, I think, is this one here, Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Geissinger. This is another Russian Mafia romance, and this is book 1 in the Queens and Monsters series. The hero in this one is Cage. He is currently acting in charge of the Bratva because his boss is in prison. And we have Natalie, who's our heroine. Now, Cage is, a debt collector essentially for the Bratva, and it's his job to track down people who owe the Bratva money and make sure that they get it back by any means necessary. And what we find out is that Natalie had a fiance who was basically the Bratva's accountant, and he's embezzled quite a lot of money from them, and he then went on the run, and they've been trying to track him down for a long time, and Cage has found his way to Natalie's house. But what we find out is that Natalie was indeed engaged to this person, but she had absolutely no idea that he was involved in the Mafia, and in fact he's now been missing for 5 years, presumed dead. He literally went missing on the day before they were due to get married, and so she has been left heartbroken and grief-stricken for 5 years because she absolutely does not know what happened to this person who she thought was going to be her husband, and they were going to be together forever. So this book very much starts with Natalie in mourning. She's you know, kind of like marking the 5th year of her fiance's passing, and she is, you know, very still heartbroken about what's happened. She has a best friend called Sloane, who is absolutely fantastic, and we'll talk about her a little bit more later as well. And Sloane really convinces her to go out and have a bit of fun, and they basically go out and have a few drinks. And that is where she sees Cage for the first time, because he's gone to kind of like check up on her, and he's in the bar where they are drinking, and obviously they just see this astonishingly handsome man, but clearly a you know, dangerous and dark kind of character as well. But he absolutely oozes magnetism, oozes sexuality, and you know, he becomes very kind of obsessed and single-minded about Natalie, and when he finds out that she's completely innocent in all of this, he decides he's not going to unalive her, but instead make her his woman, and there's going to be consequences for this decision that he's made, not only between them as a couple, but also with his boss as well. And I absolutely love this one. It's grown on me more and more over time. I thoroughly enjoyed it when I first read it. Then I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Troy Duran. He does the voice of Cage, which is absolutely fantastic. And since then, it's sort of become my comfort read. I've read it a couple more times, and I'm also currently halfway through listening to the audiobook again, which, you know, is always makes me feel very happy when I'm reading it. So I absolutely think this is probably my favourite, and one of my favourite heroes as well. I absolutely love Cage to death, so I would highly recommend. So moving on then to what is my first and favourite Russian Mafia story. Well, like I said, my very first Mafia story, and therefore my very first Russian Mafia story, was Dark Russian Angel by Odette Stone, so I've already told you about that one. So then, of course, I need to tell you about my favourite Russian Mafia romance. And of course, since I've just talked about Ruthless Creatures, I couldn't mention that again. So I want to talk about probably my second favourite Russian Mafia romance, and that is Ruthless Stranger by Maggie Cole, another book I've talked about repeatedly, and another hero in this one, Maxim, who is up there as one of my top book boyfriends. And it's only when I was doing this that I realised that actually both of these books have Ruthless in the title, Ruthless Creatures, Ruthless Strangers. So I'm starting to realise that the recipe for success here is you have to be Russian and ruthless, and in the Mafia, fictionally of course, not in real life, but that is clearly absolutely my vibe. I won't linger on this one too much because I have talked about it loads of times before, but essentially Maxim is a Russian hero. He is not strictly in the Mafia, but he's Mafia adjacent. There's definitely some Mafia wars going on, and Maxim is very much in the thick of things. He's also the eldest brother of a family of a number of Ivanovs, and he is very much protective of the family, and is seeking a way for them to kind of like, you know, get out of the Mafia lifestyle and have a normal life. Now, at the start of this book, Maxim is actually on a bachelor party in Vegas. He's going because one of his brothers is about to get married. And then our heroine, who is Aspen, is also in Vegas because she's just finalised a divorce, and she is there with her girlfriends celebrating that finally she is rid of her horrible ex-husband. And now they are trying to very much convince her to get back onto the horse and find herself a fella. And they were like, well, one night stand in Vegas is obviously the absolute perfect place to start. Now Maxim overhears their conversation, approaches one of her Aspen's girlfriends and says, hey, I overheard you talking. I would absolutely love to be the person that helps Aspen have a great time while she's here in Vegas. Please, can I do the task? But there are some rules, one of which Aspen has to be blindfolded the whole time. She cannot know who I am, and it's obviously only going to be for tonight. And so they arrange this kind of like one night for Aspen and Maxim have an amazing time. It's the best night of both of their lives. They have absolutely amazing chemistry together, and in fact one night turns into 2 nights because they have such a great time. But of course their weekend in Vegas has to come to an end, and he goes back to his life in Chicago and she goes back to her life, surprisingly, also in Chicago. And this is where they then meet for a second time, because they don't realise that they both live in the same place. And when they basically bump into each other in Chicago, although she's never seen what he looks like, she absolutely recognises him, recognises his voice, recognises his smell, and knows it's him. And of course he knows who she is. And now that they have met together kind of in their real lives back at home, he is now not going to be able to stay away, because one of the reasons that he made sure that she was blindfolded in the first place is because he wanted to protect her, protect his identity, but protect her from falling into his world. Of course now she is well and truly firmly in it, and he is now going to be extremely possessive and obsessed over his woman, and will do anything to make sure that she is safe. And I absolutely love, like I say, Maxim as a character, but also this story, and would highly recommend. So then after that we've got Italian mafia romances. So what was my very first Italian mafia romance, and what was my favourite? So the very first one that I remember reading was Machiavellian by Bella de Corte. I read this quite a number of years ago. It has got a very complex storyline, so I can't remember every single element of this, but I do remember that I really enjoyed it. And it's book 1 in the Gangsters of New York series, and we are following Capo, Machiavelli. So basically most people call him Capo, but his other names are Mac or Vittorio as well, so he goes by a number of names. And our heroine is Mariposa. Now this ends up being kind of a marriage of convenience sort of tale, an age gap, and it starts out in New York, but they do travel to Italy as well. So the main story here is that Machiavelli used to be kind of like the executioner for his Italian mafia family, and he was sent to unalive Mariposa's family when she was quite a young girl. He was supposed to eliminate everyone in the family, but obviously saw her as a very innocent young girl and realised that she couldn't possibly pose any danger to his organisation, and chose to spare her life. But he couldn't tell anyone he'd done this, because obviously someone would come to finish the job if he didn't do it. So he secretly takes her to a new family to be raised and cared for. And so over the years he's kind of kept his eye on her, and now she has grown into a very beautiful young woman. Now through a very complex turn of events, their paths finally cross once more, and Machiavelli ends up convincing her to marry him as a marriage of convenience. And then basically as part of this, they then travel to Italy, where she meets the rest of the family, and they have their wedding, and their relationship kind of goes from there. Like I said, this is a very complex plot, loads of characters in this one, lots going on, and it continues through into the rest of the series. But like I say, I remember absolutely loving this one, and would definitely recommend, and I may even go back and have another look at this one to jog my memory. So then my favourite Italian romance has to be Bound by Honour by Cora Reilly, and this is part of the Born in Blood Mafia Chronicles series. It's book 1, and we are following Luca and Aria. This is also an arranged marriage. It's between 2 Italian families, one who basically rule over Chicago, and Luca himself, who runs over New York. Now Luca is older than Aria, but they are arranged in marriage when they're kind of younger. So I think Aria is probably only 14 when she's arranged in marriage to Luca, and of course they wait till she comes of age until they finally tie the knot. The thing is, Luca is known to be a very, very cruel, kind of harsh mafia ruler, and he's known as the Vice because he unalives people with his bare hands around their neck. And so Aria is actually quite scared of Luca, and is very concerned about what's going to happen to her when she's married to him, because in the Italian mafia, this is a very, very traditional mafia setup, as you would kind of envisage in your mind of how this would all work. And women are not treated too well. They're kind of stay-at-home women. They're not told too much about what's going on. They're supposed to do exactly as their husbands tell them to, and their husbands can do whatever they want. So she's not looking forward too much to marrying Aria, but still she is a mafia princess, and she's been born and raised to be his wife. And so obviously she's not going to put up too much of a fight to get married, but she isn't looking forward to it, let's say that. However, Luca ends up being much kinder and sympathetic and softer towards her than he is to anybody else. Their wedding night in particular is a very, very poignant moment, and one that really, really made me love Luca and respect him quite a bit, and also is the kind of turning point in their relationship, where Arya then can start to trust him, and they can actually start to develop a real relationship and do in fact fall in love. So I really, really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this couple, and I really, really liked the fact that it was kind of felt more old school mafia, and that also our hero was, you know, very, very cruel to everybody else apart from his wife, who he would literally do anything for, and I absolutely love that about a mafia story. Okay, on then to Irish mafia romances. So my very first Irish mafia romance that I read was Savage Daddy by Bianca, and this is book 2 in the Boston Mafia Dons series. Now this has recently been rebranded, it's been recovered, rebranded, and is now called Savage Bidder. I think that Bianca has taken the word daddy off all her titles, because there is daddy kink in all of her books, but I think she's removed it maybe and revamped the titles in case the daddy element puts some people off. So essentially in this one we're following Malachi and Scarlett. Malachi is head of the Irish mafia basically in Boston. He is a completely unhinged hero. In fact, he was the villain of book 1. He did some horrible things and we really didn't like him at all. And now we come to book 2 and it's his story. Now, he is not a nice man. He doesn't seem incapable of love, and he really, really mistreats his women. In fact, he's got a bit of a vice where he likes to bid on virgins at virgin auctions and then have his wicked way with them, and then use and abuse them until he's done, and then basically kicks them to the curb. And so this book starts where Malachi is at the latest virgin auction, and he's got his eye on Scarlett, and she is there because she desperately needs money for something. I can't remember if it's because a relative is sick or if it's something else, but she's desperate for some cash. And so she heard about this virgin auction where she only has to spend one night with the person who bids on her. The thing is, Malachi does win her and takes her home, but he's not going to be happy with just one night, and he basically then keeps her captive for much longer, you know, like I say, sets about using and abusing her until he gets sick of her. The thing is, he is not going to get sick of her because he starts to fall in love with her and realises that he does have a heart after all. And although he's still extremely unhinged, very obsessive and possessive over this heroine, he also starts to melt a little bit for her as well. Of course, Scarlett doesn't know what to make of him at first. She is scared, but also very intrigued by him and actually enjoys some of the things he does to her in the bedroom. So their emotional relationship really does start to develop from here. But of course, since he's been the villain in book 1, maybe the other mafia dons in Boston aren't going to be too happy that he's finding happiness, and they're going to try and step in and cause a little bit of trouble for everyone involved. So I did really enjoy that story. I haven't read it in such a long time now. I'm not sure how it would hold up now, but I have recommended that one in the past. But then if I think about my absolute favourite Irish mafia romance that I've read, then I have to also talk about another JT Geissinger book, and that is Carnal Urges. And in this one, we are following Declan, who is head of the Irish Mafia, and Sloane, who is best friends with Natalie from book 1, which was Ruthless Creatures, which I talked about earlier. Declan, like I said, is head of the Irish Mafia in this one, and this one pretty much starts where he kidnaps Sloane in retribution for something that went down in book 1. So basically, it's Sloane's fault that the Russians and the Italian Mafia are now at war with each other, and so Declan has basically kidnapped Sloane as a bit of a punishment to punish her for basically causing this war. The thing is that Sloane is a complete and utter badass. She is an amazing heroine, absolutely kick-ass heroine. You know, she is so full of kind of fire and life, isn't scared of him, doesn't back down from him, and he really doesn't know what to do with her. He's absolutely bitten off way more than he could ever chew, and she absolutely wins over all of the men in his in his organization. The people that are supposed to be guarding her and preventing her from escaping absolutely fall in love with her as well, and he cannot help himself. He tries to resist, but he cannot help himself but also start to fall in love with Sloane. But she's going to be a very tough nut to crack. She is not going to submit to him easily, and so the relationship between these two is absolutely fantastic, great to see. Also, a fantastic plot in this one as well, which I won't talk about because I don't want to say too much and spoil it, and I have talked about this book before as well. So, absolute favourite Irish Mafia romance for sure. So then now thinking about different types of tropes that we get in Mafia romances, and the first trope that I want to talk about is captor-captive romances. Now, the first one that I remember reading was Beast by Measha Stone, and this is a fairy tale retelling based in the Mafia world, and obviously, as the name suggests, Beast, this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Our hero in this one, who is the Beast, is Ash, and he kind of is head of a criminal organisation, and he also runs this kind of sort of sex club, but it's basically where he has women who will go under contract with men for a specific amount of time. It could be the weekend, it could be a month, it could be 6 months, but they're kind of trained to then kind of like do whatever the person who's contracting to them wants them to do, and it's kind of like a bit of like a BDSM club because they're sort of dominant and submissive as well, and they've kind of got all of their kinks and everything and their list of things that they will and won't do. And like I said, Ash kind of controls these girls, puts them into contract, but they aren't there forcibly. It's not sex trafficking or anything like that. It's just they all are consensually there. But also, although he's nice to the girls under his employ, he's also obviously still the head of a criminal organisation, so he's capable of some very violent things. And in addition to women, he also basically is a bit of a loan shark, lends out money, and obviously needs to get it back when it's been borrowed with interest. And so the start of this book is where Ash has summoned our heroine's father. So our heroine is called Ellie, and Ellie's father is in debt to Ash, and he's basically brought him there to, scare him into paying back what's owed. And the father basically offers to sell him his daughter because that's what he thinks he does there. But Ash is like, well, I don't buy women. That is not what I do at all. And then her father tries to sell it to somebody else, and then they bring her to Ash. And Ash is absolutely livid. This has come full circle, and basically takes Ellie in and holds her sort of captive, trying to force the father to basically pay the money. But obviously he's also quite intrigued by Ellie and kind of wants her to be there, so he's sort of keeping her captive for his own nefarious purposes as well. And then of course they're going to be in close proximity with each other, and they are going to end up falling in love. So then I was thinking about my favourite captor-captive romance story, and I have read quite a few, but surprisingly I haven't read many really recently. But I think probably the best captor-captive, or the best story that encapsulates a captor-captive story, is the Tormentor Mind series by Zaires. Now this is a 4-book series, but I really enjoyed every single one in the series. And in this one we are following Peter and Sarah. Peter is a Russian hero. He used to be in the military. He used to have a wife and child, but due to a terrorist attack on the village where they lived, his wife and child were unfortunately unalived, and he is then left the military and spent the rest of the last decade pretty much tracking down every single person responsible for what happened to his wife and son, and one by one taking them down. Now this includes obviously people in the American government and generals and people of very seniority, and he's getting very close to the end of his list, one of which is the heroine Sarah's husband, who she thought was a journalist but actually is an undercover CIA agent and partly responsible for what happened to Peter's wife and son. So Peter comes to her house looking for her husband and pretty much ties her up and tortures Sarah into giving him information, of which she eventually does, and then he goes about his merry way, and then obviously her husband ends up being unalived, and of which she is now absolutely distraught because she's the reason that her husband is deceased, but also she was bizarrely attracted to the man who did it. Now, they then spend quite a number of months apart, but Peter is very fascinated with her as well, can't stay away, and eventually comes back. and then eventually captures her and takes her to Japan, where he's going to keep her hostage essentially, although he's not expecting anything in return, but he just wants to be with her, and he's decided that he's going to have her and she has got no choice, and so he's literally going to keep her captive until he can convince her that they should be together. Of course, this is a 4-book series. Loads of stuff happens in the plot, lots of things happen between this couple, but like I say, I think it is one of the best examples of a captive relationship that I've read and would definitely recommend. So then on to sort of forced marriage or arranged marriages. Now, sometimes a forced marriage is slightly different to an arranged marriage, because arranged marriage could be a perfectly amicable relationship between 2 mafia families, and they decide they're going to join their families together, and you know, the couple kind of aren't in love when they get married, but they are definitely consenting to the relationship. And then we have forced marriages, which for me are the ones where the mafia heroes force a marriage on the heroine for some reason, like to keep them safe, because they're repaying a debt, just because they want to, or maybe because the families have agreed that they should be joined together, but the heroine doesn't agree and she tries to escape before the wedding, that sort of thing. So, but I've put this category kind of like together. So this is forced marriage / arranged marriage. So it's people that aren't in love to start off with, coming together and getting married. So the first one I remember reading was another Bianca Cole. This is book 1 in the Boston Mafia Don series, and was originally called Cruel Daddy, but as again, like I said earlier, it's been renamed and now it's called Cruel Obsession. And essentially in this one, this is an Italian mafia kind of romance. The main heroine, Ada, she actually lives in Italy with her dad, but her dad arranges her in marriage to Milo, who is head of the Italian mafia organisation in Boston. And so one day her dad basically just drugs her, sends her with a bodyguard to Boston. She wakes up on the plane, and when she lands, Milo informs her that they are indeed getting married. So she feels extremely betrayed by her father, doesn't want to marry Milo, but Milo pretty much, you know, drags her down the aisle, kicking and screaming, and forces her into a marriage. And their relationship gets off to a rocky start, but basically goes from there. So then, of course, I have an absolute favourite in this category, which is a forced marriage, arranged marriage. In fact, this is sitting somewhere between those 2 categories, and that is Dom by S.J. Tilley, and one of my favourite mafia romances of 2023, and also a firm favourite. So in this one, we have Dom. He is head of the Chicago Mafia, but he's desperately trying to join the Alliance. So the Alliance is this criminal organisation headed up by Nero and King, who you know, were books 1 and 2 of this series, because this is book 3 in the Alliance series. So in books 1 and 2, we learn about Nero and King, who are part of the Alliance, and Dom is desperate to be part of the Alliance because he's got some trouble brewing, and he really wants the security, the additional security, reinforcements from the Alliance to help him out, basically. And he asked King and Nero to help him, and they pretty much turned him down because they don't trust him. So Dom comes up with another plan in order to get himself into the Alliance. And this is where our heroine comes in, Val, because Val is the half-sister of King, and Dom hatches this plan where he is going to basically seduce Val into falling in love with him, and then con her into marrying him before King even finds out. And then basically once he's married to Val, then King will have no choice but to let him in to the Alliance. And this is basically Dom's plan. So he does set about this. He engineers a meet-cute of Val and Dom in an airport. You know, their flight is delayed. He upgrades her to first class. He buys her a new bag. Lots of stuff happens, and they end up having a spicy scene in the airport. And then they agree that they're going to keep in touch, and they end up for the next couple of weeks, couple of months, sending each other text messages and really getting to know each other. This whole time, obviously, Dom is really playing Val. He's trying to seduce her, get her to fall in love with him, and she's absolutely doing that. She has had a very, very difficult past. She doesn't really feel that she fits in. She's only King's half-sister, and she doesn't really feel like she's really part of the family. And so she is completely won over by this guy who is very, very attractive and is being so attentive towards her, seemingly really, really likes her. Then basically she happens to go to Vegas, and she contacts Dom to say, hey, I'm in Vegas, and he goes, hey, I'm there too, let's meet up. He's not there, but he jumps on a plane, goes to Vegas, because this is the perfect opportunity where he is going to drug her and get her down the aisle so that he's going to marry her. And when she wakes up, he pretends like they were both drunk. Oh no, we were both drunk, we got married. But then she realizes this was all a ruse so he could get what he wanted and King would let him in the alliance. And then of course she is very, very unhappy with Dom about this. But while Dom has continued to go through with his plan, of course he has started to develop feelings for Val, and then he sets about trying to win her over and convince her that yes, maybe he had bad intentions to start off with, but his feelings have definitely changed. I absolutely love this story for a couple of reasons, not least because Dom is a fantastic hero. He is so obsessed with Val. Some of the things he does are absolutely outrageous, but I absolutely loved it, was smiling throughout, and it was such good fun to read. I would absolutely highly recommend. Okay, so the last category I want to talk about today is Repaying Odette. So the very first Mafia romance where basically Odette has been repaid was Beauty and the Beast by Georgia Le Carre. Now in this one we're following Sky and Luca is our you know, head of the mafia, basically, where they are. I can't exactly remember what city they're in. And Sky is just a regular girl, but her mother is very, very sick and she needs some money. So what Sky has actually done is, in exchange for paying some medical bills and supporting her mum through her illness, she is contracted to this other criminal in town, and he's basically said, you know, be my woman for the month, and in exchange for your services I will help pay your mum's medical bills. Now this arrangement, like I say, was supposed to be for a month, but it's gone on and on and on, and she can't really get away from this guy. He really makes her skin crawl. She doesn't enjoy being with him at all, but she doesn't know what to do to get out of the situation, and also obviously she's still desperate for support from her mum. Now one night she's at a party and Luca happens to be there. He overhears a conversation with her and her mum, figures out what's going on, does not like the guy she's with anyway, and decides that he's going to buy out her debt, basically, pay the other guy off, and then she is now going to be indebted to him. And he then basically says, so I will now take on your debt, I will now look after your mum, but now you belong to me. And basically that's how that one goes. You know, their relationship goes from there. And I remember enjoying this one for sure. Then I had to look through and think, okay, what is my favourite book in this category? And I was surprised that I actually haven't read a Repaying Odette romance for a long time, because it's actually a fairly common trope in Mafia romances, but I haven't actually read one for a long time. And as I was going through all the ones that I'd kind of rated and the ones that I'd enjoyed, I was very surprised to find that Den of Vipers was my highest rated book in this category. So Den of Vipers by K.A. Knight and Hereruthless Harem. Now this is a Marmite book for a lot of people. I know some people absolutely love it, and I'm in that category, and some people have read it and thought it was absolutely awful and don't speak highly of it at all. So like I say, very, very a Marmite sort of book, this one. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it mainly because the characters in this one are completely feral, and the heroine in this one is completely kick-ass, and absolutely holds her own, and even goes, you know, above and beyond all expectations when dealing with this crew. And so the Den of Vipers themselves are a crew of 4, and we're following Ryder, Garrett, Kenzo and Diesel. And they are basically head of this criminal organisation. They're feared by all in town, and in standard fashion, when we're repaying a debt, our heroine's father is in quite a lot of debt to the Vipers and suggests that they take his daughter as payment. Now Roxy is actually, like I said, a very independent woman. She's got her own business, she runs a bar. So basically these men come into her bar to pick her up, basically take her to the Vipers. Of course she gets out a baseball bat, beats them up in the bar, and tosses them out on her ear. And the Vipers are very, very intrigued by a woman who could have done this to men that they've sent to go and pick her up. How was it that she was able to fend them off, and also why isn't it that she is not scared of the Vipers themselves? So they in fact go and get her for themselves, and then they take her back kicking and screaming, quite literally, to their pad, where they decide that they are all going to basically share her. And like I say, this is reverse harem, so she has a relationship with each of the men. Each of the characters are very different. They're all very kind of tortured heroes, and they're all trying to come to terms with their own issues. But Roxy kind of soothes them all in very different ways, and she has, you know, a great way about her where she can, you know, adapt herself to the situation and be what the man needs, basically. So a couple of the characters are more unhinged than the others, and one of them even encourages her to do some pretty shocking things, but she absolutely rises to the challenge, and if anything becomes even more feral and unhinged than they are. So she absolutely holds her own, and that's what I mainly loved about this book, is that she wasn't cowering, she didn't need their protection, and in fact becomes their queen and almost in charge of this criminal organisation, because they pretty much worship at her feet by the end. So would highly recommend for sure. So there you go, that is my first and favourites Mafia Romance edition. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and I hope to see you next time. Bye. But what I thought I'd do today is just have a bit of a mixture. So I'm going to talk about my first and favourite, and this time I'm talking a let's not bother with the shout out, because that's not right. And actually, beautiful creatures. Anyway, was Dark Russian Angel, Malachi, so on that basis then, what is my first and favourite Russian Mafia hit? Russian, and she has to go and stay with him basically to so that he can. Now